thing work? How you do this thing?
How's it going? Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat.
We gotta come up with a Shabbat shalom song, right?
We're just making this up as we go, so I had no idea what he was going to be saying. So, how are you doing? And welcome to Swedish Love, my page here on Instagram. This is Chris.
That's me.
My husband, and he is also here on Instagram under 67 Podcast. We are here for this will be the fourth time that we're doing our Shabbat studies, and we've been talking on about some pretty heavy but interesting, intriguing things. So we are going to continue the conversation here. This next topic that we're going to be talking about, which Chris will tell you about very soon here, is, I think, the most important puzzle piece to everything. And so, hopefully it will be answering a lot of questions. We have 3 other videos. The last video that we did, we had to split it into 3 parts because it was very long, but and therefore it was easy to maybe navigate. We have these lives also on YouTube, so you can find it in my bio here on Instagram. If you like to find out more about what we talked about, if you have any questions, you can go there and maybe the answer is there. Also, I like to say, if you have any questions for this video, ask them, please. And if we get to them, awesome. And if we don't, please write them down. And when this video gets posted, ask the question again, because we try to get to all the questions, easy and hard, no matter what. We're trying to answer them all. So the last topics that we've had is Jesus, who he is and who he's not, priest versus prophets, the sacrificial system, and this time we're going to talk about the spouter of lies.
I'm actually trying to share this live on my page.
Who is that?
Who could it be?
Who is that?
Who could it possibly be?
We're going to get into that here in just a sec. Chris is sharing onto his page so that as many as possible can see that it's actually happening right now. I know we said 4:30 and it's 4:35 that we started. But we try. We have a 8-week-old baby. So we set some goals and then we try to hit them, and then shoot for the moon and land among the stars is what we try to do.
Amongst.
So without any further ado, Chris, would you like to start off this particular topic here that we're going to be going into?
I would also like to point out that, I can't actually share the live stream on your new updated version of Instagram. So thank you. Thank you, Meta. But so...
Well, if you have friends and you think that this is something that they would be interested in, please share it. And no matter where, if you're on the live right now, if you share it, or if you go when it's up on YouTube, if you share it then. But I guess the point was to share it while it's live.
Well, yes. The point is, if you feel so inclined and what we've spoken about up to this point has really helped you or intrigued you or challenged you, we understand. It challenged us too. So tonight should be juicy. I would encourage everybody to go ahead and find your closest wall outlet, cell phone charger.
Have your charger.
Have it ready.
Have some snacks.
Have some snacks.
Have a babysitter if you need to.
I have to, hey everybody. So I'm going to, hopefully, I'm not even going to say how long it's going to be because I don't know. All I know is I have some outlines and some notes to help bumper lane my thoughts tonight. And I'm inviting my wife to help, reel me back in or interject or ask questions. Tonight has so much going on that I don't know how much time we'll really have to take questions live, but we do like questions. So I would say if you have questions based on what you hear us talking about tonight, write them down or text them down or put them type them and then screenshot it. And then once the Instagram goes live and once the videos are on YouTube, once the Instagram goes saved and we just share it on our profiles, and the YouTube is live, then you can comment under those videos, and we'll try to answer the questions like that. Because I think a lot of your questions help other people who might have similar questions, and if I do answer them, or Jennifer gets to answer them, the answers might be able to help others. So,
also, I wanted to mention that we have gotten some feedback about maybe starting a Facebook page where we can be like a forum where we can talk, and like people with like minds can go there. And so once we have that set up, which I will try to set up this week, I'll share it, and I'll share it on here, and hopefully we can all continue the conversation there, but also here and everywhere else that we can have this conversation.
Oh yeah.
So, okay, without further ado.
Whew, all right, y'all. This is a long time in the making. So a lot of people who are on this thread already, at least a couple that I've seen, are friends that we've spoken about this subject matter in real life. But up to now, I have not spoken about this publicly because it's kind of a challenging thing to do publicly, because it's kind of a nuanced conversation. When you're dealing privately, you can tailor how you respond or how you frame things based on what you know about the person you're talking to. But when I'm talking to a wide range of people in the future, it's harder to do that. So it's been something that I've always been like, Father, like, you reveal this to me. I feel vexed at first. We feel vexed about it, but we totally are interested in just being honest with sharing what we know. And I always said, when you give me the go ahead, when the time and the season is right, I will talk, and I will talk boldly. I just never felt that time was right or the season was right until now. And so here we go. So what I am going to explain, and what we've been talking about in this series thus far, is some thoughts that we have based on about 9 years now worth of looking into the truth of Christianity, the Bible, Jesus, God, the apostles, just kind of the entire conversation around the church and Christianity. And it has not been an entirely easy journey. It's been like easier. It's not been like, oh gosh, I'm vexed, I can't do anything. But there have been like
just mind-blowing moments where it's like, what?
Right. And then
it connects everything from knowing
it connects, correct. And then we get to certain places where we go, I think I can, like, my mind has been blown into bits and put back together like 5 times. Surely we've got it all now, right? And then you hit some new mile marker and you're like, okay.
Now we're on the fringe
sure.
of things.
So it's cool because apparently so was Jesus. So that's cool with me. So with what I'm about to explain, I'm going to be pretty straightforward.
And we are going to pray too after this.
Yes. So I really want people to do their best job at trying not to prove me wrong as you're hearing what I'm saying. It's hard, I get it. But I'm asking that you sit your red teacher's pen down for a second and just listen. Just hear me out. I don't mean you any offense, I promise you. Hopefully in my tone and how I talk, it's quite clear that I'm not intending to offend anybody. I'm merely sharing information that when I first heard it was very offensive kind of to me. Now, I didn't take offense to it, but it definitely was like a Mike Tyson punch to my gut when I first heard it myself. So
I was very saddened.
I understand that it might be challenging, but just try to not nitpick, because I'm presenting to you. I wish I would have bought my jigsaw box. I'm presenting to you a bigger series of pieces to a jigsaw puzzle. I like to give this analogy of a jigsaw puzzle, right? The bigger picture in life is like this big 10,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. Each little thing that I'm about to mention, which is several little pieces of the puzzle, is in and of itself just one piece of the puzzle. None of them are a ha gotcha by itself. But collectively, I do believe they paint a quite clear picture. And the reason we've been discussing these things like we've been doing is because the point is for us to make it as clear as possible that what we're delivering is not our own opinions or our own conjecture or our own hypothetical conclusions based on what we think we know. We changed our minds after 9 years of looking at hard evidence and information we just never knew existed. Okay, when it comes to any sort of argument or any sort of point, there's always two sides to every story. If you know one side of the story, cool, but if you've never even fathomed or been introduced to the other side of the story, maybe just hear it instead of trying to tell the other side of the story why they're totally wrong and you've never spent any time on the other side of the fence figuring that out. So the reason I find this conversation interesting for any person listening who's an agnostic is because I think that, like, I really do enjoy talking to my friends who are agnostic because they've gotten to a place where they realize, usually, I know there's probably a God or a creator or something. I'm pretty sure that these churches and these religions ain't it. And that's step one in breaking the propaganda. So kudos to that. I do believe that a mature, spiritually sound person seeks a little further. And that's what I'm hoping to be able to do with you tonight. But from what for the agnostics, I think what we're going to say should make a lot of sense. For the atheists, I think what we're going to say should also make a lot of sense. But for the most part, atheists don't have a huge dog in the fight. So if you ever just want to grab your popcorn like a Michael Jackson meme, be like, I don't really care about this no way, but like, let's see what the deal is. Cool, just listen, because I'm hoping that once you see what I'm presenting, something might actually intrigue you to investigate the truth that has been, unfortunately, a bit overshadowed by the propaganda and the state lie. For my Muslim friends, my Islamic friends, what I'm about to explain to you should make sense, or hopefully help make sense, about why some of your history and some of the way that Christendom, as it relates to the American government or military in particular, has been the way it's been, and why some of the atrocities that have happened under the banner of the folks that follow Jesus have been the way they are. And so my beef is not with you Muslims. I've come to learn a whole lot more about what I never knew about your religion growing up, but this is not a talk about Islam. This is a talk specifically and poignantly about Christianity. And it has a lot to do with the focus on a very prominent New Testament character that I do not believe many people have a solid beat on. And I only say that because I know for myself, I didn't have a solid beat on this individual. So for my Christians, what we're going to talk about tonight is either going to trigger you or it's going to make a whole lot of sense. It's kind of like in Christianity, it's split down the middle. It's either going to make you sweat and want to punch me in the face or disagree with me, cut me off. I'm not offended. You wouldn't be the first. But for the other half of you, it's going to go, this makes everything. This is why there could be 50,000 denominations of my religion that don't all agree, but technically all agree on. They all even one book. That's 13 variations, but it's just one book. But this should help explain a lot of the similarities amongst some of the beliefs, because when you really get into it, the differences in most of these denominations stem from the interpretations of the words of one individual in this book. And incidentally, that individual is not Jesus, it's someone else. So we'll unpack this. I got plenty of evidence. I got a whole list of outlines. I got examples. We're going to be reading a couple chapters from some books to help clarify. I got study tools, y'all. I can't compare it. I've been working on this kind of all week. She'll tell you. It was like Tuesday. I'm sitting there like, I got work. I got a video shoot coming up next week. So I'm like, I'm doing pre-production for work stuff. And I got to prepare this big thing for Saturday. Like, I got to start now. I have to do this days in advance. So this, like I said, I haven't spoken on this publicly ever. I mean, I've talked to plenty of y'all privately about it, but not publicly. And the reason is because I haven't found a nice way to deliver hard news. And so what I'm hoping that you catch from this is that what I'm presenting might be tough and challenging, but I don't mean to offend you. So if you decide you want to get offended, that's on you. Okay, that's on you. I'm trying to tell you, please, this is not an offense. I'm not even telling you what to do or how to think. I'm merely telling you what I've learned, what Jennifer's learned, what we've come to understand. And if for some reason my lovely co-host has to dip out for motherly duties, or you hear her squirming, almost 2-month-old now, a couple days shy of 2 months, we have a baby. He's just right here below frame, and he's now sleeping because
He wasn't
we were going to go
earlier.
in at 4:30. We were like, okay, cool, baby's down. 4:29. I'm hungry. I'm diaper stank. So here we are. Anyway, okay. So first thing I'm going to do is pray, and then we'll get into it. Father, thank you so much for the funny way in which you choose to reveal yourself in these hidden truths that you ironically conceal to all the great kings and studied men of all the earth and women, but somehow manage to deliver to your servants and your prophets and your seers and your priests in a righteous orientation humbly, that seem to baffle a lot of what the state and the mainstream has to say about a matter. Thank you so much for bringing us into this awareness. Help us please be good and faithful at delivering this message. Block any spiritual warfare or anything that would come against the truth being delivered here. May our humility and our tone and the bowing and obeisance that we have toward your Most High and your Ruach HaKodesh, your Holy Spirit, be evident in all who listen. May the ears of anybody who's ready to hear be enlightened and open, where you connect all the dots on your Ruach side of things, so that we can simply be conduits of information that we receive that we can freely pass on. And it's in your Son, Yahshua's name we pray. Amen. So, like we've been doing this whole series, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. What's next?
Then I'm going to tell you.
Then what?
Then I'm going to tell you that I told you.
All right, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. Then I'm going to tell you. And then I'm going to tell you that I told you. All right? All right.
Here goes.
Thesis stated. So we, at this stage in the tail end of 2023, have come into a firm belief that the Bible contains the truth to life in it. It also contains a test. It also contains a false prophet, the words of an individual who Jesus and several other people would identify as a false prophet. And that individual is known by most people as the Apostle Paul. Okay? I'm like, we rolling it out like some hors d'oeuvres, because 9 years of taking this position, sometimes I get a bit frustrated and just like campy and facetious, and I have to keep in mind that when I was first introduced to this information, I did not like it. I did not find it funny. I did not find it like sound, or
It was not cool.
It was not cool. It was not kosher. None of the above. But and I'm going to explain the story of how we came to this in a second, but it was just something that hit me. I know with you probably can explain what it was like for you, but I know for me, I just was kind of a bit like, that can't be true. What do you mean, false apostle? That was my whole tone at first.
I just got sad. I was like, what?
Right, because she
Is
didn't.
this true?
Right, she hadn't grown up with all the affinity, right? And some of my favorite verses are some of what Paul writes still to this day. So it's kind of, it's a nuanced thing. And this is why it's kind of a difficult thing to talk about publicly, but by the guidance of the Most High and the gift of gab, I suppose, I'm going to try to do my best job explaining why I think this. And I do understand that the way I present it and the tone that I come off is not because like I read this last week and I'm like, ooh, I'm pretty sure this is true. Okay, Chris is just going to hop on Instagram. There was multiple times where I almost spoke about this publicly and I said, you know what? I don't want to be judged or be held responsible for misleading people. So I'm not going to talk about years ago, right? Years ago. Let me double back and double check my math on this. 2 separate occasions that happened. Once when we were still in Los Angeles, and then another time at the top of COVID. But we didn't. And I'm glad we didn't, because now I actually do feel a peace about it. Do you?
I do.
Okay.
I mean, I've been wanting to talk about it
she felt a piece about it. She feeling
like,
a piece
let's
of
talk
it. She
about
want to
this.
take a piece out of Paul. I'm like, baby, just calm down. The truth don't need you to fight for it. It's going to fight for itself. Okay. So the other thing I completely forgot to do is pull up our final No. Deuteronomy. We'd be looking at...
Right.
Okay, Deuteronomy.
Be
Okay.
prepared as can be.
So... The reason... So this is basically how it happened with us. The year was 2015. Let me back up. I'm going to try to do a good job of explaining to you the kind of categories by which we're approaching this. I have some notes, and these notes have an outline. So when you watch this or when you watch it back, it should kind of, hopefully, theoretically make sense. So I remember it was February. I think it was late January, early February of 2016. So this means we're a year and 1 month into our research.
And we weren't married yet, were we?
We were about...
We were going to get married.
Yeah, we were about 2 months before. We were engaged. We hadn't gotten married.
I was still living with my roommates then.
Right. We wasn't shagging up. We was living righteous, trying to anyway. She was living with her roommates in L.A. I was living with a separate roommate in L.A. And I remember when it first hit me, because I remember having spent a year at this point investigating the industry that we both worked in. We were made well aware of the Masonic order, the brotherhoods that operate behind some of the scenes of some of the businesses that run the big influential mind control, or we'll say thought control industries, that is banking, politics, religion, at the time, entertainment. And that was our industry. She had friends that had been offered to sign a contract with their name and blood. Mm-hmm. I had friends that had been offered to sign a contract with their name and blood. So this wasn't conspiracy theory for us in a lot of cases. This was like reality. I spent a tremendous amount of time in and around the whole, I literally lived on Laurel Canyon Boulevard, which is a very famous street in Los Angeles that has a lot of activity, especially at the top of the mountain where Laurel Canyon crosses over Mulholland Drive. And it was one of those things that was just kind of like a whole year. 2015 was a whole year of me just breaking everything I thought I knew down with regard to my industry and just the way the world works. And then at the tail end of 2015, we come into the understanding that the Christian religion was very much tied into this Masonic operation. And I remember seeing a quote from, and please, I'm not praising this lady or suggesting anybody vouch or take any sort of credence in her general themes of life. But if you've done any studying into how this New Age is built and how the satanic engine works, the name Helena Blavatsky or understudy Alice Bailey would have come up. And it's either a Blavatsky quote or a Bailey quote that says, we're going to be using the Masonic fraternity and the Christian church to bring about the true doctrine of Lucifer. That was her quote, not mine. The Antichrist spirit will be made manifest via our control over the Masonic Brotherhood and the Christian church. And I remember being like, what kind of not like, y'all witches think y'all know everything. That ain't gonna happen. The Christians, we're the ones actually looking out for the Antichrist. How you gonna sit there and say we're the apparatus that brings forth the Antichrist? That doesn't make any sense. Let me tell y'all, 9 years later, I hate to say, I hate to agree. I don't want to agree with people I don't like usually. I hate to say she might have been right. And it's not that she predicted anything. She was literally just a mouthpiece for a much bigger operation that I'm sure was in motion before her. And this still is now that she's gone. So I remember having found the work of an individual who was presenting a lot of stuff I had never heard. It was this podcast, and I remember just going, wow, this lady is hitting me with all kinds of stuff that's just like, this is clicking. It's making tons of stuff click. Half the stuff she says is stuff that I'm like, yes, exactly. I came to those same conclusions myself. The other half the stuff she's saying is stuff I'm like, what was that? Say that again. How do you say that? Sananda. Who's that? Like, I've never even heard of these people. Like, what is that? And I was introduced to the reality that there is a false light movement, we'll call it, that has an entire veneer baked in, presenting itself as the light, but being quite integrally tied in to the darkness and into destruction. It kind of fits that checkerboard theme. it's a very common thing I always say all the time. We're in an era of we're in an era of deception, not an era of lies. So do you know the difference in a lie and a deception?
Deception has truth laced into it, and a lie is just straight a lie.
A lie is a non-truth. A deception is a series of truths strung together, often by omitting certain other truths, that lead someone to a destructive end. So I could deceive someone, but never lie to them, if that makes sense. So I remember having found this new podcast. I'm listening, all these things are firing. And then out of the blue, the lady says, yeah, and it was crazy because I remember when the Lord first told me what a false apostle Paul was. I just, it was a struggle. And I stopped praying. I stopped talking to God for a whole year. I was so sad. I was devastated by it. And then a year later, I said, all right, God, if this is something you want me to share, just help me wrap my mind around it, teach me, and I'll be happy to teach others. And I remember being like, what did she just say? Paul, a false apostle? Like, what do you, no, like, who says that? Like, what does that even mean? Like, what does that, like, how could you even make that claim? Like, on what basis, right? This is what's going through my head at the time. And I remember being like, delete, like, click, not interested. But before I click, the final two things that she said that I heard was, the Father showed me how Paul is a false apostle, and he began teaching me these patterns to help identify this, one of which was that Paul was the only person chosen by God in any sort of mighty way who was in a state, who was on his way to go murder someone. When you look at the entire Bible, every single David, Gideon, Achan, Samuel, Elijah, Elisha, Noah, and everybody from start to finish was always in a state of righteousness prior to the Most High saying, yes, I choose you. I elevate you to be my servant for X, Y, or Z. They were, in some cases, literally had taken the Nazarite vow. So not only were they righteous by Israel's standards, they were like the super duper righteous ones because they were taking the Nazarite vow, not shaving their hair, doing all these extra things above and beyond the average requirements. And the second thing that they said was that, yeah, the story in Acts where, Paul has this conversion, it's the only time in the entire book Jesus blinds somebody. I mean, we have a whole book of Jesus performing miracles and healing the blind. And then we have one character who's introduced in an unrepentant state to Jesus where Jesus blinds them. And I was like, all right, so what? Click, delete. What does she know? False apostle. And I was huffing and puffing, y'all. I was huffing and puffing. So I was like, it kind of felt like, hey, guess what? Oh, sorry to bust your little Tuesday afternoon up, but guess what? And that's the way it felt at the time. And I just remember hitting click and walking away and be like, I'm not interested. And for the next 2 months, I didn't listen to that person for months, for weeks anyway. For the next 2 months, it was like, Paul would call it a thorn in his side, but I wouldn't call it that. I would just call it the truth nagging at the bottom of my psyche going, clink, 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 clink. Please investigate what this person just said. Please, just don't get triggered. Just investigate. And I remember for months, I couldn't shake it because keeping in mind, y'all, if y'all have watched the earlier parts of this series, your boy grew up in Bible school. Okay, so I was like Mr. King James Version. I was literally King James's nephew in my own mind. I was that astutely aware of the Bible. And I remember going the whole time, she's got a point. Like, I can't think of a single person other than like a Cyrus or a Nebuchadnezzar that was obviously God using them in their completely idolatrous state to judge Israel, not being someone who's a advocate for Israel. I can't think of anyone like, she's got a point. And the other thing I was kind of like, she's right. Like, God doesn't blind people. He always heals the blind. Like, why can't I shake this? I'm sitting there making salsa, like cooking something. And I'm just kind of like the whole time. It was just, it just bothered me. And I remember getting to a point a couple months in and being like, all right, Father, I'm a year and a half into this research. I've learned everything about the Illuminati. I've learned everything about Masonry. I've learned everything about the entertainment industry. What I absolutely do not want to do is like throw Jesus and the Bible and the baby out with the bathwater. But I can't shake what that one person said for like 30 seconds of my life 2 months ago. And it's like this knot in my stomach that's got to be scratched. Can you please help me clarify this? If this is true, I need witnesses. I need evidence. I need more than just the opinion of some random person on the internet. I do not operate like that. Okay, people have tried to make the claim about some of our non-mainstream positions that we've presented earlier in this series as if they've come off haphazard or if we really need to go back to the drawing board on these things that we've been doing for 9 years. But it's kind of like you're not looking at cursory carry over here. I'm super thorough about basically everything. Even my wife will tell you. Even with these notes, I spent 12 hours in the last 24 hours, double checking, getting everything right. So anyway, I remember getting to a place where I just was kind of like, all right, Father, if this is something you want me to look into, just give me a piece about it. Because right now I don't have a piece and I kind of feel like I owe it to you to look. But I'm pretty sure my boy Paul, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood. That's my verse. That's so true. It's helped me in my spiritual warfare walk. A couple days later, I literally got to a place that was like, look into it, Chris. If 2 + 2 is 4, and you're confident that 2 + 2 is 4, then you can erase your paper, you can bust out your calculator, and go 2 + 2 equals. And if you see 4 on the screen, you're good to go. But if you see anything else, maybe there's something else going on. And I said, Father, if this is something you want me to do, I need help. I need a second witness. I need a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th witness. I just can't. I don't want to go into such a strong countercultural investigation with hunches and whims. And that's when I found the book and the website of a man named Douglas Del Tondo. Many people might be familiar with him. He runs a pretty active YouTube channel now called Jesus Words Only. And Jesus Words Only was the name of his book that he released. We absolutely had 2 or 3 copies of that book, but we've given them out to all these people, so I don't have the book in front of me. JesusWordsOnly.org is the website where he puts a lot of his a lot of the chapters. And in fact, I think the entire book is actually free in PDF form. You can just go and click it, or you can read each article, and each article is essentially a chapter in the book. But I remember finding Jesus Words Only, and I probably spent a solid 5 or 6 months going through every square inch of that website as he was presenting case after case, point after point, time after time, clear discrepancies in the words of Jesus versus the words of Paul, a clear indication that the New Testament has this Roman wrapping, the theological deviation that suggests that it's a new thing. Whereas most Christians grew up saying, our God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and forever. Only now he has a New Testament. And I just remember being like, Father, I want to know the truth. We've already kind of come this far. What do we make of this? And that summer of 2016, that was, if y'all remember me saying I took 2016, 2017, and 2018 off from work till I got super broke and then had to start working again. That was when, because it just was right, we just melted under the weight of, life has been a giant lie. Everything, religion, politics, entertainment industry, money, government, all of it. Food and agriculture, all of it. And it just was such a heavy thing that at the time I was a bit scared. And I remember being like, I don't know if I could ever wrap my head around something this crazy and talk about it. Oh, this is crazy. It seems that these 2 or 3 people on the internet are the only people who think this way. 9 years later, that's definitely not the case. There are websites and books and scholars and writers and authors from the 1st century, the 2nd century, the 3rd century, the 4th century, the 5th century, the 6th century, the 7th century, all the way through Martin Luther and what they had to say about Paul in his writings during the Reformation, all the way to what Luther changed his mind on later in his life after the Protestant Reformation, where he realized that his take the book of James out because James is too anti-Paul was actually a giant problem. And there's writers today, there's writers in Africa, Europe, Scotland, literally thousands, tens of thousands, we'll say thousands of people have written very detailed and very careful exposés on this. So what I'm going to be doing today is collecting some of those, giving y'all my notes, our thoughts, as well as the writings of some others mixed in to show, look, this is not a hunch or a theory. We're not just feeling some type of way. I was a bit intrigued when I first heard, like, interesting. I've never heard anybody pick Bartholomew or Thaddeus out the blue to hate on, but like not Jesus. Like usually if you want to hate on Christianity, you hate on Jesus. But this person wasn't hating on Jesus at all. In fact, they were trying to like restore his name to Yeshua, restore his practices, get everybody back to following the Torah. This was part of the journey for us that we had already been Torah observant for a few months by this point, but this was really something that locked in. Yo, we actually need to follow God's word. Like God has a plan and a set of instructions. Like we actually got to do that. That's what Jesus was saying the whole time. Someone else comes and says, nah, don't do that. Don't do that. Just believe in the fact that Jesus did it, and then you're good. But Jesus himself was like, no. If you love me, you keep my command. So you'll see in a second, we've got comparisons. There's like all kinds of differences on getting paid in the church, like pastors getting paid for what they do, on the idea of salvation and eternal life, on women and their roles or lack thereof in leadership positions, on tongues, or like on how to define tongues, whether you're defining it like the apostles did or like Paul did, which is very separate. And what this person said that really did stick with me, it was challenging at first, but they said there are two gospels in the Bible. In the New Testament, there are two gospels. Two. And you got to choose. And the reason they're there is because, like Deuteronomy 13 suggests, the Most High allows false prophets. So before anybody's like, well, hold on now. Don't you think God would? Don't you think God would protect his word? Don't you think? I'm going to need for your case to be built off more than just a general question that we've been given for 9 years. And I'm going to need you to refer back to Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 1 through 5, where the Most High in his Torah says, I allow false prophets. I specifically allow them, specifically so that I can test if you love me or not, if you're listening or not, if you're paying attention or not. I mean, let's not get it twisted. Jesus on being taken up to the high place by Satan was essentially God allowing a false prophet to tempt Jesus. He passed the test, but God was like, no, Satan, you can't go talk to Jesus. He's Jesus. He's equal to me. You can't talk to me. He didn't say that. He allowed it. He has allowed Balaam in the case of ancient Israel. He has allowed Simon Magus in the case of first century Acts, disciple territory. He has allowed plenty of false prophets, and specifically to test. So before I read Deuteronomy about why he allows false prophets, Stephanita, hi there. What I'm going to do, what I would love to point out first is that Christians in particular must, and when I say must, most of this whole conversation is going to be me talking about my learnings and my reflections. So I'm not telling you what to do at all. But as a generalization, Christians are usually left in a position of naivety because they are sheltered from not knowing anything about what Satan does. Oh, the devil's under my feet, feet. The devil's under my feet, feet. Ooh, now the victory is complete. Jesus bore principalities, made a show of them openly. He's under my feet. Okay, this is the stuff I used to sing as a child. The devil, where is the devil? Under my feet. Really? Because the Bible says he's roaming the earth, seeking who he may devour. He was talking to Jesus in the Bible. You see what I'm saying? They campify this concept of what Satan's capable of. And because Jesus is more powerful than the devil, period, end of story. Never mind, the devil has some tricks that anybody who ain't Jesus might actually fall prey to according to Jesus. But here we are. So the binary oversimplified thinking of, well, wouldn't God have protected it has to go. Yes and no. Can he protect it? Sure. Did he protect it? Not that I can tell. Seems like he didn't protect it for Jeremiah in chapter 8, verse 8, when Jeremiah talks about the lying pen of the scribes working falsehood. Seems like he didn't protect it in the case of Yeshua, talking about the leaven of the Pharisees and all the scribal and pharisaical additions. As far as I can tell, he wasn't necessarily sitting over Constantine's shoulder or Jerome's shoulder or Rufinus's shoulders. He edited half of what Jerome told him to edit. It's just been the world that we all live in. Every industry has been subject to this, but the Most High uses the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is what's true, and the Holy Spirit is what's active, and the Holy Spirit is what you can't edit out of the conversation. Okay? And this is why the textual record, if you ask me, has been allowed to be challenged. Because with the Ruach, with common sense, with careful study, with Berean-like study, with rightly dividing, with the honor of kings searching out a matter and the honor of the Father concealing a matter, this is how this is how truth makes it through thousands of years, because it doesn't just stay on the top page laminated perfect every single time. It's hidden, it's burnt, it's obscured, and then the Holy Spirit brings it back together in a righteous way. So from politicians to groomers to even Satan himself, any good deceiver is going to give you mostly truth. I'm going to say that again. From politicians to groomers to sexual predators to, coaches that want to recruit you for their own personal gain, where you can just be a cog in their facility or their franchise's will from a sports standpoint, to sharkish real estate agents that are really trying to get you into a house that might not be the best, and you might have a lot of repairs to do, but they get that closing cost and they got bills to pay, so you get it. They're not going to necessarily lie to you, but they might deceive you. And to do that, they're not going to tell you false statements. They're not. They're going to tell you mostly true statements. They're going to omit a handful of things. They're going to take 10 to 15% of what they say and twist it right in your face. Gaslighting is a great example of how that works. But they're not going to say, "Hi, I am a false apostle. My name is Paul. I am false. I realize nobody called me an apostle but me. But that's who I am, and you better like it. And if you don't, screw you." Right? He's not going to say that. It doesn't work. Deception doesn't work. The Roman state doesn't get to control the conversation that Yeshua was upsetting by the truth that Jesus was bringing to the conversation by just lying about what Jesus said. They just kind of take it, reposition it, couch it. Oh, the Gentiles, y'all don't really know much about Jesus' backstory anyway. Okay, well, how about we tell you this? I can be all things to all men. To the Jew, I'm a Jew. To the Gentile, I'm a Gentile. To the Pharisee, I'm a Pharisee. Okay. This is how this works. So I'm not talking about an apostle or an author in the Bible that has mostly lies. In fact, I don't think Paul has mostly lies. That's the trick. That's why I need you to put your adult pants on, because I think that when you if you look at every word and lay it out, I can find more sentences in his books that I agree with than sentences that I disagree with. Okay. The ones that I disagree with, however, just so happen to be all the ones that the entire Christian religion is based off of. And they happen to have stark differences with Jesus specifically about matters integral to salvation, justification, righteousness, works, all of these things. I have seen Torah observant people, bless all of their hearts, try and defend Paul's validity to no avail to their listeners, because the problem with Paul is he's unfalsifiable, meaning he admits himself to this, I'm at this. If I have to lie for this, well, so what is it to me? Why should I be counted against me? I might say this, I might say that. I'm trying to work this in and spread the gospel, my gospel, his gospel, not Yeshua's good news, his good news. And when you really get into the history of it, it becomes very, very clear. The real apostles that Jesus handpicked and that spent a year with him hated this dude. Hated him. It's so clear. There's like beyond 10 or 15 different writers who are concurrent with these people. We're talking first and second century sources that will all say, the apostles and Paul, they didn't get along. The Bible has been massaged and things have been watered down, and the word disnoetos in 2 Peter 3:15, in Greek it means nonsense, but in English it's just difficult to understand. It's difficult. Like if my little 8-week-old son was trying to write pi to the 10th digit, 3.14159265, as an 8-week-old. He might scribble it. It would look like gobbledygook, like a prescription from some doctor that doesn't care, right? And you can say, well, it's a bit difficult to understand. It is. Or you could also say, yeah, this looks like nonsense, right? Same word, dysnoetos in Greek, but your English Bibles will say, well, sometimes he writes in a way that's a bit difficult to understand. Yeah, and this is why Christians who are honest will admit, yeah, Paul, I had no clue what to make of this dude.
Yep.
Right? So she unlike me, if you've been listening to our early stories, my wife here didn't grow up in a church setting. She grew up in the second least religious country on the entire earth. So as how old in 2013, she began to investigate Christianity and start reading the Bible for herself. There were things that she walked away from with head scratchers, or conclusions that she drew about Jesus that were different from the ones that the church she was attending at the time were saying. And so why I'm trying to be clear about what I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, is that I don't want to mince words up front. I want to establish that I do believe we are looking at a book, a holy book, that is in no way infallible, because it never suggests that it was. Yes, somebody brought up the Revelation 22 verse. If anybody adds or takes away from the words of this scroll, consequences will come. And it's kind of like, got it. I do believe that God told John to write that in John's book 257 and some change years before there was ever a Bible. But if you think that those words he told John applied to words he told Job or Moses like 2,000 years prior, you're not really thinking things through. And it doesn't say, hey, it's impossible. God will prevent anyone from changing the words. It doesn't say that. It says there will be consequences for the people who do. And I've seen plenty of scholars point out that in a lot of these erroneous translations, some of the scholars did suffer consequences, particularly having the pattern was that their speech stopped working. They went mute. Separate tangent, separate thread, separate day. But we're dealing with an important book. Please don't take this as a discouragement for me suggesting that you read the Bible. You should. What you should do is you should actually, let me not tell you what you should do at all. What we got to a place of doing is going, okay, got it. So Rome is who said 66 books. And these authors, in most cases, didn't even know each other. So they were not writing because they got a call. They were like, hey, John, hey. So, the Bible audition went out. The casting directors were like, we like John. We like him. Jesus liked him, so we like him. So you're in. Give us Revelation and John, 2 books. We need 2 books from you. Your publishing and your proofreading and all your spell checking is due by next week. We'll take PDF, Word, or HTML. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like that. They wrote their book, or they had a scribe write it for them, because in a lot of cases they couldn't read or write. And when you begin to read each author as just a book by itself, like they were, the scroll of Isaiah was just Isaiah. The scroll of Jeremiah was just Jeremiah. When you read it and you stop trying to use some other book or some other thing from thousands of years, in some cases in the future or the past, to justify the writing of a different person, that's when I believe we can start to get a little further into what's going on. So I'm going to read really quickly Deuteronomy 13, just so that y'all know that this is God giving us all a test, saying, all right, Rome, you can do what you're going to do. But this is my test for all of the people who are called by my name, who want to answer the call. For many are called, but few are chosen. It's true, but that's not untrue. It's just that chosen really should be, for many are called, but few choose. And in parentheses, and therefore few are chosen, because only a handful choose to answer the call. And this call is about testing everything, even us. Please, Jennifer and I will never sit here and say, you must trust us, you must believe us. In fact, if you blindly believe us, as a Christian anyway, you slipping, because you're supposed to be berean, you're supposed to actually be double checking that what we're saying isn't bogus. I'm not here to debate. I'm just saying that's what we did for everybody who told us the same thing for 9 years now. And now we're on the other side of this, where we're like, got it. Okay, there it is. Got it. It's very, very clear, Father, that there's 2 gospels in this book. One is Jesus's, one is Paul's, and 99.9999999% of people I knew are choosing Paul's, because we're all told that Paul is clarifying Jesus. Paul is expounding upon what Jesus says. Paul is fleshing out what Jesus says. Paul has more words than Jesus or anybody else in the entire book, but you read the Gospels, then you read Acts, then you read all series of Paul's books, then you read Jesus' brother, his other brother, and his first apostle, and then you read John again, and then that's it. So you're still left with mostly Paul's opinion in the second half of this book. And incidentally, the entirety of Christianity is mostly based just on that. So we'll get into it. But Deuteronomy 13, 1-5, it says, if a prophet arises among you or a dreamer of dreams and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder which he tells you comes to pass, and if he says, let's go after other gods which you have not known and let us serve them, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or to that dreamer of dreams. For the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with your soul. You shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him and keep his commandments and obey his voice, and you shall serve him and cleave to him. But that prophet or dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he has taught rebellion against the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you out of the house of bondage, to make you leave the way in which the Lord your God commanded you to walk. So you shall purge the evil from the midst of you. Now keep this in mind. So you shall purge the evil from the midst of you is the end of that injunction. And way at the tail end of the book, we're given a thumbs up from Jesus to John to the church of Ephesus, who identified the false prophets among them and kicked them out. Separately in Paul's books, we're given his own testimony that all those in Asia have rejected me, as he's leaving Ephesus from the fact that the people are disagreeing with him. So we really do have a lot of the pieces of the puzzle to put this story together. Now, growing up, I used to read this and be like, ooh, there must have been false apostles. I wonder what that looks like. Ooh, I wonder who he could be talking about. And just thinking that these stories were written in this linear fashion, connected as if each author knew the rest, as if John was filling in the blanks for Matthew, or Matthew is filling in the blanks for Mark, or Luke is filling in the blanks for Mark, when the truth of the matter does not actually bear that out at all. These people just wrote what they wrote. Even Paul, he just wrote what he wrote. He wasn't writing for the Bible. He was writing to the church here, to the church there. When you look at the book of Acts, this letter, dearest Theophilus, I forget how the formal greeting goes, but it's addressed to Theophilus, who is the pagan magistrate of Nero. Y'all remember Nero? I was introduced to Nero as a 15-year-old trying to make some burnt CDs. When I download my songs from Napster, all these little Beanie Man, the girls, them sugar, Janet, all this little stuff from the early 2000s. Try to burn it on a burnt CD, and I was using Nero burning ROM. Nero software. Put the songs in there, hit burn. That was a software named after the mockery of the fact that Nero burnt not Christians, followers of the way, Nazarenes, the very same people who Paul mocked. So,
and killed,
and was on his way to kill when we're introduced to him in the Acts conversion story, which has 3 separate variations. And so we're going to get into it because there's a whole lot to unpack. So again, with Deuteronomy 13, 1-5, this is saying, like, listen, I'm telling y'all, there's going to be some false prophets among you. They might do signs and wonders. They might. Jesus himself said, many false prophets will come and will deceive many and will do many signs and wonders. Signs and wonders is not a criteria that you working for God by default. I mean, if y'all don't remember the magicians that were supposed to be working with Pharaoh, when Moses was talking about let my people go, and he threw down the stick and it turned to a snake, they threw down their stick and it turned to a snake too. Okay, so it's not like signs and wonders equal God. It's that you have to kind of follow it through. And really, God is pretty consistent with his instructions and his rules. So everything we're presenting tonight is in an attempt to rightly divide, put a line down the middle and say, this is what I think we've been given as state propaganda over here, and it's heavily reliant on the one guy in this entire book that's unlike all the rest. Everything over here is what Yahuwah was saying, and the prophets and all the disciples and the apostles, the real ones, and Jesus specifically. And that had everything to do with obedience, water, baptism, repentance, righteous living, right ruling, right doing, forgiveness, and an adherence to the original pure Torah, which by Jeremiah's day hundreds of years before Jesus' day, had become corrupted. Now, a lot of people don't want to believe that because they want to believe that it's all glue and it's just this one congruent story. But that's the state propaganda telling you that. That's just not the case. Like we can take that same sentence and just take religion out of it or Bible and put in like pharmaceutical rules or FDA and food, like natural flavors being healthy and stuff for you. Polysorbate 80 not being a problem. Polyethylene glycol being totally fine for you. Lipid nanoparticles totally not becoming a problem in your vascular system. All of these are state-sponsored themes too. How about this politician will save you? Vote for him, and then all your problems will be fixed. State propaganda. Same model. So, again, try not to decide you disagree with me already and just hear me out, because I do understand that what I'm presenting is challenging. I do. I really do. And so I will be a bit campy, but I'm trying not to be sacrilegious or to be mocking, and to even acknowledge that even though I do consider Paul to be a false apostle, any good false apostle is not going to tell you 100% lies. So there are verses that Paul has in the books attributed to him that I do agree with in this instance where they're not talking about salvation. Ephesians is a great example, talking about, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against power, against principalities, against rulers of darkness and high places and spiritual wickedness. That's a true statement. No matter whether I agree with the dude's theology or not, that is a true statement. And as it stands, he's really the only person that the editors left in to give us that type of insight. So it makes this whole thing like a game of operation where you don't really want to hit the sides of the thing, hit a noise. You want to kind of just be like, listen, y'all, this guy is not giving y'all a consistent message when you look at Yeshua. And the only way you can really tell that is if you evaluate the writers themselves. If you stop reading Paul and assuming that he must be validating Jesus, so I have to work out the math to figure out why he must be. You see, it's called going around your butthole to get to your elbow, they call it. This is why I'm just asking for everybody's patience and favor. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to establish which books are Paul. So if you're familiar, if you're kind of a Christian scholar and you know what I'm talking about, sit tight for a second. If you don't, if you're kind of like, well, okay, Paul, but like, which ones did Paul write again? I mean, I wasn't paying attention that day in Bible class. I'll tell you. Do you know? No,
I just know that there's 13 of them. Yeah. So I know when I look at the names.
Sure, okay.
I know which ones.
So in the New Testament, I'm going to tell you all the New Testament books, because we're focusing on New Testament stuff today. And again, if this is the first video in this series that you're seeing, before you really get hella triggered, what I really, really need for you to do is go back at least to video number 2, right? Part 2, because part 2 is really explaining the Bible. Like, come on, y'all. Like, this book is not this magic Jesus force-filled book. That's what we spent a lot of time in part 2. And I should have honestly done that up front. But the first talk was just, all right, babe, let's talk. Okay, fine, let's just do it. Okay, we talk. And then I went back after that and said, ooh, I should probably take 5 and like set this up well for people so that I don't lose people out the gate.
Is that the one called Priest versus Prophets?
That's the third one. That's part 3. So the first one is, who is Jesus and what was he? The second one is how we got the Bibles we have.
Yeah, but we called it that.
No, that was the third one, the sacrificial system, priest versus prophet.
Oh.
I'm the one who made the thumbnails, baby, so I do remember. It's all good. It's all good. You remember. It's fine. You good for stuff.
I mean, I know what it was about, the video.
So, okay. So I really need people, I would love, and this is all kind of playlisted and put together, but please watch it from the beginning. It's long, but I promise you we aren't gonna bore you, because I did it this way on purpose. I did it this way on purpose. I didn't mention Paul. I did mention him once if you were listening, but very loosely. But I spent 12 hours, 13 or 14 hours, 4, 8, yeah, 14 hours so far, setting up a case for why we should be following the law of the Most High, the instructions of the Most High as the guide for how we live our life as a means to walk the road to salvation. Because we believe that this is exactly what Jesus was saying to do. Matthew 19:16 through the end of the chapter is a great example of this. And I do believe that if you have ears to hear and you can understand that, okay, maybe Jesus isn't who the Roman state said he was, and maybe this book isn't perfect, And maybe God actually does want obedience and not necessarily sacrifice, like he's said, 50 times from all his prophets. Maybe there's something to this, because the reason I did it in that order is because after tonight, it should be very evident that the two gospels presented are very clearly different. Jesus' and Paul's, and Paul's relies on the blood sacrifice model being valid. That's why we spent last Saturday for 6 straight hours talking about the invalidity of this idea that you killed the animal. Okay, great. Now you're forgiven. I need blood. I need to smell it in order to forgive you. That is not the nature of the Most High. And Jeremiah said it. Amos said it. Isaiah said it. David said it. Obadiah, like literally almost.
And other books that have been
plenty of other books
that
were taken out or not ever included to begin with. They all say it. But it's lost in the sauce because Paul, if you read Peter's works that weren't included in canon, he says, you have made a religion of blood. And it's like when I read that, I was like, yes, exactly. That's exactly what they did. They focused so heavy on death, the death of Jesus, death, his blood sacrifice, blood atoning, his finished work on the cross, which wasn't a cross, by the way. It was a stake. Let's not get it twisted. The word cross comes into the English. When you look at the Greek, it doesn't say cross, it says stake. Now, whether that looked like a T or it looked like a pole or it looked like a tree, I don't know. I'm just saying we've been given a whole lot of this, and this. So the Christian motif, this cross, this torture device that people wear around their neck as a endearing means to associate themselves with the work of Jesus on this torture device. That's a Roman thing, right? I don't hate people who do it. I used to have cross necklaces. It's not about you. It's not about look why you're wrong. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to say this is what we've learned. And if you want to make some sense about why things don't make sense, why you have the biggest religion on earth where the Messiah says few there be that find it, we're going to explain why and how that is tonight. By all means, any questions or insertions, do. So that I don't belabored, I'm going to keep it moving. Okay, so now I'm going to establish what books are Paul. So in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, Titus, Philemon, Hebrews, James, 1 Peter, 2 Peter, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, Jude, Revelation. Okay. In that lineup, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John are what are considered the Gospels. This is where you will find all the words in red. This is where you will find the theology of Jesus. This is where you will find the instructions of Jesus. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Then you have Acts. Now, the book of Acts is coined the Acts of the Apostles. The apostles that we're told Jesus handpicked, 12 of them. And then there's this 13th guy that just calls himself an apostle with 0 second witness or nobody else confirming that, especially not Peter or James. And this book of Acts, the first handful of chapters, 3 or 4 chapters, is mostly speaking about the greater number of the apostles. But then the other subsequent 20-something chapters are Paul. Then you have 13 books in a row that are all Paul's books. Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, Titus, Philemon. Okay, those 13 books are attributed to Paul. Now, the illustrious, very smart scholar from my hometown named James Tabor, who is considered by many in the scholarly world to be one of the experts on Paul, specifically as his dissertation and most of his books and all of his seminary work and collegiate work has been focused on Paul. He breaks Paul's books into 2 categories that he calls primary Paul and secondary Paul. Primary Paul are the books that all scholars agree, we're pretty sure Paul wrote these. We're pretty sure. Like, it's a pretty ironclad case that Paul did write these books. And there are 7 books that are primarily Paul's. Then you have secondary Paul, which is We're pretty sure Paul did not write these books. There's a lot of linguistic reasons why. There's some names that differentiate these, take a theological left turn that doesn't match this other stuff. And they couch those as secondary Paul, meaning someone in the 1st century or 2nd century or possibly 3rd century just wrote them, stuck them in the Roman canonized Bible, and attributed them to Paul. Well, Paul didn't write them. So before you come shooting me or throwing tomatoes at the book you are told is infallible, I need you to understand that almost every scholar I've ever heard weigh in on the matter all agree that pseudepigraphal writings, meaning writings that are later written but attributed to someone in history, are a thing. And because the oldest complete Bible codex is basically 400 years removed from the events of the New Testament, there's a lot of pseudepigraphal activity going on. It's just a fancy, scholarly collegiate word for, they probably didn't write it, but they wrote it and then slapped Peter's name or slapped Paul's name or whoever's name on the book. So the primary Paul are Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Philippians, 1 Thessalonians, and Philemon. They're pretty sure Titus and Timothy is just like totally not Paul. And then 2 Thessalonians, Ephesians, Colossians, they're like, well, it might be or could be. Could be not. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that this entire Bible is a story about Hebrew people. It's about the establishment of creation through Adam, and it follows the family tree of a man named Abraham, who was from the region of Hebron, from an ancestor named Heber, where Hebron in Hebrews comes from. And that people group is very kind of like nationalistic in a way. And kudos to them for that, right? There's no shade on Jewish anything. It's saying we have a thing, an identity, and that identity has been challenged here and now, but there is a thread that can be followed. And I need for people to understand that Paul, even though he claims to be Jewish and a Pharisee of Pharisees, modern rabbis chuckle at that notion, and we'll get into why. But this dude is mostly Greek. He was Greek-ish. So we have the one hella super duper Greek in the mix, who incidentally, in a book about Hebrews, has more words than all the other Hebrews. Moses has 5 books. David has some Psalms that are pretty lengthy in cases, but songs and poems. Solomon has a few books. Ezra and Nehemiah, these prophets, have a couple books. Jesus is mentioned in 4 books. Jesus' brother and his family, they're given like, okay, y'all can have a napkin and a half. Jude, Yehuda, his younger brother, you can get 1 page. Okay, we'll give you that. James, Jacob, who King James later said, no, I don't like Jacob. Yaakov, I don't like that. I like James better. James has a handful of chapters, but they pale in comparison to all Paul's books, even the ones that Paul probably didn't write. They just said he did. And we have 13 books plus the book of Acts that was written by Luke, Paul's more or less lawyer, most likely, or a companion of Paul's, and the book of Hebrews, which again, any honest person will tell you we have no clue who wrote it. Oh, it's perfect, it's infallible, but I can't tell you who wrote Hebrews. Only in the last few years have some scholars come and said, we think it might have been Barnabas that wrote Hebrews. But again, Barnabas was an understudy of Paul's. Barnabas never met actual Jesus or any of he met the apostles, but he was not a part of the conversation when the apostles were chosen. This was all later.
Babe, I just want to ask a question. Are you going to mention how you become or how you were able to be an apostle? The witnesses about that?
Oh, we got all of that. We got that. That's in there. The criteria in Acts.
There's a criteria for
There's a criteria. We'll go ahead and
it's in the Bible.
Spill the beans. It's in the book of Acts, in the early part of Acts, that's talking about all the apostles, where there is criteria that it stipulates how one becomes an apostle. And we'll even break down what that word means, because that's a term you hear now. Oh, apostle so-and-so, apostle, Nehemiah Johnson, or whatever.
There could really only have been 12.
There's only 12. The office is closed. Now, there's teachers.
Judas,
Right. Well, there's 12 because Judas got killed or killed himself, and Matthias is chosen in the first chapter of Acts to replace Judas. The office is closed. The criteria for being an apostle was that you had to have walked with Yeshua for more than a year, and you had to be witness of his baptism, where I don't want to get into that, but the baptism is a lot more significant than we've been taught. Now, we already know Jesus was baptized. He was like God. He was already God because Jesus equals. He was born from the beginning as God. He created the world as God, but then he was baptized by God. This is my son in whom I'm well pleased. It used to say, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. This day I have begotten thee. You'll find that in Matthew and Luke. If you go to early Christian writings and you look at some of the writings of the earlier manuscripts before all the Codex Vaticanus and all the official Roman ones got popping, you will find this day I have begotten thee. Well, of course, if Jesus equals God and he's begotten from the beginning, as the whole Council of Nicaea drama was all about, they just had to take them lines out because that's not going to look too pretty if this day I have begotten thee was a line by the Most High in the baptism experience that is nowhere to be found in the Bibles today because the state propaganda said, no, he couldn't have said that because he was begotten from the beginning. He was begotten, not made. He was made, not begotten. So we're going to get into it.
All right.
Paul is quite unfalsifiable, and I really want, and I'm highlighting the concept of unfalsifiable because in his own words, in Paul's own words, I am all things to all men. To the Jew, I am as a Jew. To the Greek, I am as a Greek. To the Pharisee, I am a Pharisee of Pharisees. Now, Jesus had a bone to pick with the Pharisees at every turn. You will not find a single nice thing that Jesus says about the Pharisees, basically, in the entire book. But Paul is a Pharisee of Pharisees. In fact, according to Paul, he was trained by Gamaliel, the Pharisee of Pharisees with 2 E's on it, the premier Pharisee of Pharisees, to the point where rabbis today, like famous rabbis today, like on YouTube right now, can trace their lineage back to Gamaliel and do so honorably, right? These are the very same rabbis that just literally will laugh you out the room the second you want to say, well, Paul was a Pharisee of Pharisees. But, oh, really? So then why is he always quoting the Greek scriptures if he's this Hebrew of Hebrews? You know what I'm saying? That's like being a Tom Brady fan and being a Patriot of Patriots, a New England Patriot of Patriots, and you're constantly quoting the Seattle Seahawks or the Cleveland Browns quarterbacks and coaches, Hall of Famers. You know, the Miami Dolphins. It's like when you play for the home team, you play for the home team, right? You play for the home team, you talk about your team. We Hebrew, we talking about Hebrew matters. Okay? Ask me why this dude mostly always quotes the Greek version of the Old Testament called the Septuagint. Oh, well, because he was talking to Greeks. Oh, really? Is that why? Or because there was something else going on? Because, again, the actual apostles that hung out with Yeshua, they used the same Hebrew scriptures. The drama, we'll get into it in a bit. So I want to talk about this section I'm calling Paulnomalies. Anomalies. About Paulnomalies. Now, if you or anyone you might be married to or love is named Paul, please don't. I'm not throwing shade on nobody. I'm just trying to show y'all what the Most High has shown us about this guy. So when I was young, I don't know if you played this in Sweden, but in America, we played a game called Which One of These Is Not Like the Other?
I don't know if we play that. I don't think so.
It's kind of like, it's a little bit like the game of Clue or whatever, Guess Who, that you were playing with Zeev the other day, where you kind of like identify patterns, and then what you're trying to do is say, this one stands out as different based on the pattern recognition, okay? So, which one of these is not like the other, right? We have the only murderer the only person God ever said, I'm plucking you out of obscurity and elevating you to a position in my kingdom. In my book, I'm giving you more words than anybody, including my own son. I realized that you were on your way to murder the few people who actually recognize my son as Messiah, but you can be chosen. But I love you. But I knew you. But I love you anyway, even though you're doing the most un-Torah-like thing. Killing, murdering, premeditated, because you asked the chief priest for permission, and you was all the way on your way all the way over to Damascus, a city to this day in Syria known to be favorable to Christians or followers of the way. That's part of the backstory to Jordan, to Lebanon, which is one of my favorite places on earth, and to Syria, to Assyria and to Syria, is that they were always sympathetic to Islam, Christianity, all these different Sunni Shiite like discrepancies, as well as Christendom. These are countries that have all of these religions represented, because it goes all the way back into like the Damascus Road Book of Acts territory as being similarly favorable to these beliefs. So we're told Paul's conversion story. So the first thing I want to do is highlight the conversion story. Now, the conversion story is unique because he tells it 3 different times, 3 different ways, y'all.
It's his own witness.
Okay? Everything on 2 or more witnesses, a matter is established. That's biblical, right? Ask me if Paul has 2 or more witnesses. All his witnesses are himself. I say this, I am. He don't have a second witness unless it's a person he hired or a person he taught. But he has no second witnesses. Okay, so
you always got to have 2.
Always, at least. Okay, so Acts 22. Sorry, Acts 9, Acts 22, and Acts 26. These are the 3 different conversion stories. Now, when somebody's lying, like if you're the cop, like let's say you're a policeman, right? And you catch me with my hand in the cookie jar. And you go, woo, and I go, well, what is it? And you ask me, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Me? Nothing. I was just, I like some food had fell in, and I was just reaching to grab it out. Out. And this tea
You're
bag.
not supposed to eat that cookie there.
Oh, well,
You're not supposed to eat those.
I didn't realize I wasn't supposed to eat those. And as it turns out, I wasn't eating it. That I was just babysitting it, right? So let's say that's interrogation number 1. And then this investigator steps out the room, and then another investigator comes in, and then she asked me the same question.
What are you doing?
Huh?
Are you eating those cookies?
Cookies? Eating? No, I was sitting here just crumbling the cookie. I thought these was cookies. They look like cookies. They did. They look like them. They really did. So I just wanted to make sure they was gluten free. That was really, I thought I smelt gluten. I thought I did, but I wasn't sure. So I'm looking, you see what I'm saying? If I'm telling my story and then a third time separately with a third investigator that comes in, and it's 3 different ways, the 3 investigators are going to go out and be like, yeah, he said he had dropped some food in there. Oh, really? Well, he told me he was like looking for some crumbs, making sure it was gluten free. Oh, really? That's what he told you? Well, he told me this and this. Do I look like I'm telling you the truth if my story can't be straight after 3 different versions of it? Okay. Now, it's not just like, oh, some details I forgot in the first story or some details I added to the next one. It's like the men who were with me saw a light. And then the next time, the men who were with me didn't see a light. God said, Jesus, why are you Saul, why are you persecuting me? Is it you, Lord? Is it you? Yes, it's me who you're persecuting. Go into the city, and there you will be told you must do. Until you get to Acts 26, and it's, oh, no, here we are in the wilderness, and I'm going to tell you this, and this, and that. So
someone that has never met Yeshua, right. Jesus,
exactly.
In the first place.
Exactly, right? Which one is it? Did he tell you nothing, or did he give you a whole paragraph and a half of instructions? You told a story 3 different ways. So let's read it. The first one. As I made my journey and drew near to Damascus, about noon, a great light from heaven suddenly shone about me, and I fell to the ground, and I heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And I answered, who are you, Lord? And he said to me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting. Now, those who were with me saw the light, but did not hear the voice of the one who was speaking to me. And I said, what shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said to me, rise and go into Damascus, and there you will be told all that is appointed you to do. And when I could not see because of the brightness of that light, I was led by the hand by those who were with me and came into Damascus. And then it goes on, he meets Ananias, etc. Now, never mind the fact that in the whole book, except for Ananias and Sapphira, who we know was cheating the church out of money and basically got killed for it, all the other Ananiases were Greek Sadducees / high priests that murdered Jesus, murdered James, and essentially kind of catapulted the entire Jewish-Roman war of the first century. So the guy who murders Jesus and the guy whose son murders James and Shimon Bar Cleopa, their other brother or cousin, this is the same dude. I mean, maybe not, who you're going to meet. Okay, cool. But what does he say? He saw the light. Sorry, those who were with me, who those people are, nobody knows, right? Those who were with me saw the light, but did not hear the voice of the one who was speaking to me. Okay, so now we're going to go down to Acts. That was Acts. I read the second one. I'm going to go up and read Acts 9. So I just read Acts 22. I read them out of order, but it's fine. So, chapter 9. But Saul, still breathing. This is the second story now. Okay, I just read you the first one. Here's the second one. But Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogue at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. Now, as he journeyed, he approached Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven flashed about him. And he fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And he said, Who are you, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But rise and enter the city, and there you will be told what you are to do. The men who were traveling with him stood speechless, hearing the voice, but seeing no one. Saul arose from the ground, and when his eyes were opened, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. And 3 days he was without sight. He neither ate nor drank. Okay, now then it continues on. He met a disciple, Ananias, Okay, but, so this is the only time I can recall of Jesus blinding someone. Which one of these is not like the other? Jesus, heal the blind, sight be you, heal your leg. But this Jesus comes and blinds Paul. Hey, you got it. If we go back to the chapter 22, what we see is, where is it? And I'm trying to think, who are you, Lord? I'm trying to...
Is that the one you read? That's the one you just read, I think.
Right, but I'm trying to... Oh, yeah. And those who were with me saw the light, but did not hear the voice of the one who was speaking. That's in chapter 22. But in chapter 9, it says, and those... Why can't I find... Oh, yeah. And those traveling with him stood speechless, hearing the voice, but seeing nothing. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They saw the light, but heard nothing. Hearing the voice, but seeing nothing.
The complete opposite.
Which one is it? Did they hear it or did they see it? You just said the opposite. Okay. Now let's go to 26, because the first two times we're given, get up and go into the city, and there you will be told what you must do. So at this point, Paul is standing on trial, and he's actually he's being tried at this point for what everybody in the region was saying, preaching against the Torah. Same thing we accusing him of doing was the same thing the first century church was doing. Okay, just let's make that clear. Thus I journeyed to Damascus with the authority and commission of the chief priest. Okay, now this is the third story. And at midday, O king, I saw on the way a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, shining around me and those who journeyed with me. And when we had all fallen to the ground, I heard a voice saying to me in the Hebrew language, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It hurts you to kick against the goads. Now, slight pause. Remember a couple episodes. This line right here is the same line in Greek, written in meter, that Dionysus, the son of Apollo, the Greek god, creator of the world, says in his play Bacchae, written by Euripides. This is basically one of the demigods on Mount Olympus saying, you lesser mortal, why do you persecute me? Like, it hurts you to kick against such a mighty thing. It's going to end up hurting you. But the unique thing is that it was written in meter. And I gave the example last time. It would be like Jesus saying, Saul, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay, Sully? Because you've been struck by a smooth criminal. You see what I'm saying? That's what it would be like, because anybody familiar with this play or the song Smooth Criminal would be like, oh, he's actually saying it just like Michael Jackson said it. It was a popular thing at the time. Now, some make the argument, well, Jesus was saying that to get Paul's attention because Paul was a tent maker and most likely a stagehand in the theater. And so it was something relevant for him. Yes, sure, historically that does bear out. But are we really out here saying that the creator of heaven and earth, who's equal to the actual true God that most of y'all think is equal to, is out here quoting Dionysus, some demigod, incestuous creation. You see what I'm saying? Quoting a play with him in meter and rhyme. Is that what we're really suggesting out here? Or maybe they just actually put that in because in the case of who Paul is speaking to in this particular experience, that was a pagan magistrate who might have found favor in those words from that play by Euripides quoting Dionysus. I'll leave that up to you to decide, but keeping going. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It hurts you to kick against the goads. And I said, who are you, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But arise and stand upon your feet, for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to appoint you to serve and bear witness to the things which you have seen me and those which I will appear to, delivering you from the people of the Gentiles to whom I send you, to open their eyes that they might turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, that they might receive forgiveness of sins and find a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. Okay, so this is the first time you ever hear Jesus talking about faith in him. You never hear that language elsewhere. Separately, who is it, QAnon, that still talks about going from darkness to light? This whole darkness to light, darkness to light, darkness to light. You got that. Third of all, in Greek, the word Kyrios, Kyrios, just means sir or master or Lord. You say it in the form of like the old English Lord, not in like the American Jesus equal God Lord. You're saying, who are you, sir? Keeping in mind, this is Saul at this point, right? The entirely paganized, murdering on his way to go kill, cool with the chief priest of the corrupted Sanhedrin, which we talked about in the last chapter of this series. Getting their permission on conversational first name basis with them, not a fisherman, right? Not a Galilee-based fisherman who was unlearned men, a high establishment dude. Could have been the equivalent of a Ben Bernanke or like a Henry Kissinger as far as the government, not that old, but just in terms of his position in the American financial and political engine. And he has this experience where both of them, now everybody gets knocked down off the horse. At first it was just him, then it was just the dudes, and then it was everybody, right? And then when he says, who are you, Lord? He's saying, who are you, sir? Like, hey, who are you? What are you? Who are you? Now, let's not get it twisted that there is a clear pattern here between Christianity, Islam, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, the whole like Elizabeth Clare prophet, New Age, the extension of Christianity, the Seventh-day Adventist thing, where all of these major figures, the major figures in all of these religions, Joseph Smith, Charles Taze Russell, all these people saw a light, and then that light commissions them to begin the religion that's based off that experience where a light appears to them. Go back through your entire whole rest of the Bible and find me one example of when a light appears to a man that is supposed to be God, okay? So we have examples like in Abraham where he's coming back from out in the field and he sees three men standing under a tree, and one of those is angels. We have when, hey, God, if you would spare Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot, any righteous man, if there's even 5 or 10, can you spare him? Okay, kind of go rescue Lot. And he goes in and sent with angels. And what did the men in Sodom and Gomorrah say? Ooh, who is this dude you're with? Ooh, Abraham. Ooh, hey, boy. Looking like Lil Nas X. Who is this dude you're with? Bring him here. Bring these men with him so we can sleep with him. Right? They look like men, not like lights, like men. Or you will have experiences like with Enoch or Elijah where the men are translated up, and I was caught up into the second heaven, or I was like into a trance, and there was one like the Son of Man standing in glory with the cloud of sword coming out of his mouth, all this. But you will never see humans not in a trance where God comes in the form of a light or an apparition. Okay, so that's anomaly number 5, 6, and 7. Plus, he tells a story 3 different ways. Plus, he's quoting Dionysus in the third example. Okay, so what gives, right? Jesus blind someone? This is the first time I'm hearing this, and I'm kind of like,
or being thrown off. Did you say being thrown off?
Yeah, he got thrown off the horse. So
it's like blinded and like thrown off the horse.
Where's the little one? Here it is. So I've got this little, I'll be putting this up on the syndicated one. You can't quite see for the live stream here, but it says, is Paul credible? Version 1 of the story from Acts 9, version 2 from Acts 22, version 3. And it's like a chart. And it says, Paul saw the light, heard the sound, and fell down to the ground. That's in all 3. The men saw the light. It's not in Acts 9, but it does say that the men saw the light in Acts 22, but it says that they didn't see it in Acts 26. The men with Paul heard the voice or sound. Well, it does say that in Acts 9 and in Acts 22, but it doesn't say that they heard anything in Acts 26. The men with Paul also fell to the ground. That is not anywhere to be found in Acts 9 or in Acts 22, but it says it in Acts 26. He was told on the spot what to do. Right? At first it says, get up and go into the city. There you will be told what you must do in Acts 9 and in Acts 22. But in Acts 26, he's told right on the spot, you're going to be the apostle to the Gentiles. The same thing Peter was told. Anyway, let's keep it moving.
And if to say that you're going to be an apostle, even though you haven't had the criteria to be an apostle, which was what you were saying, someone that was there when he was teaching and the baptism, and also, I think you forgot to say, but when he was killed and then rose again. Also,
correct.
Just
correct.
a witness during the lifetime of Yeshua, or Jesus.
Correct. Okay, so this brings us to what people refer to as the Son of Man prophecy. This is a prophecy that Daniel gives that Yeshua, Jesus, actually repeats. And it's an injunction that Jesus gives to his own disciples to be wary of false prophets. Okay, so he says, in Matthew 24, verse 26, wherefore, if they shall say unto you, behold, he is in the desert, go not forth, for behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. And I'm going to read this whole chapter of Matthew 24, but it's essentially Jesus saying, listen, there's going to be false prophets. Okay. So like, don't trip up. Okay. The sign of the coming of the Son of Man. Okay. So he says here in chapter 16, let me see if I want to start it. No, it's part of his Olivet discourse. I'm just going to start in the middle just so we can keep it moving. Matthew 24, verse 15. So when you see the desolation, the desolating sacrilege or the abomination that causes desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let him who is on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house, and let him who is in the field not turn back to take his mantle. And alas, for those who are with child, and for those who are who give suck or who are nursing in those days, pray that your flight might not be on winter or on Sabbath. For then there will be a great tribulation, as such has not been seen from the beginning of the world until now, and will never be. And if those days had not been shortened, no human would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. Then if anyone says to you, lo, here is Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and show great signs and wonders, so as to lead many astray. If possible, even the elect. Lo, I have told you beforehand. So if they say to you, lo, he's in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, lo, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, or in some places, for as lightning is seen from the east to the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Okay. This is Jesus telling his disciples, the next time I'm back, you will know. It will be as lightning in the east is seen in the west. Now, please don't get it twisted that in ancient Asia Minor, basically, the ancient Near East, any location outside of any major city was considered the wilderness. So I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, but if I just go out to the outskirts of Charlotte to like Mint Hill or Huntersville or Shelby or Gastonia or Fort Mill or Rock Hill, South Carolina, any of these cities around, especially before they were all built up, it would be considered the wilderness outside Charlotte. Okay, so keeping in mind, Jesus is saying, if anybody shows up to you in a place that's basically identical like the road outside of Damascus, don't believe him, especially if he's quoting Dionysus. But don't believe him. because many false Christs will come and will lead many astray.
And what does Christs mean?
False messiahs, false like.
That's what they were calling their pagan gods, right?
Well, that was the chief title for Mithras. Yes, the war god, the bull god. Like there's a handful, there was a lot of them, but Christos Mithras was the etymological origin of where Christ comes from. Greek just didn't have a concept for Messiah or Mashiach, so they borrowed that term Christos from that. But Matthew is Jesus' words saying, don't believe him if someone comes, because the next time I'm coming, it is as if lightning is seen from the east to the west. But we're led to believe that he changed his mind. And even though he had spent 3 whole years with 12 capable apostles, he just had to come back for the one dude who wasn't an apostle, who didn't qualify to be an apostle, who was on his way to go murder the very few followers of Jesus by this point, a few years after his resurrection, or a few years after his crucifixion. And this is how we're introduced to Paul. Now, again, I understand Christians find this story incredibly endearing because this is the Christian sales pitch. I once was lost, I was blind, I was a wretched man, but God came and blinded me. I mean, saved me in the midst of my depravity by sending me to that one church that said all I had to do is believe what Paul said to believe, and therefore I am saved. Christian, I'm not trying to mock Christians because I do understand that a lot of people came into this in a sinful state or state where they totally needed to repent and found that repentance in the model of Jesus in Christianity. So please don't hear me as just mocking that experience. I'm just saying for 99% of us, myself included, that was mine too, right? Maybe yours is a bit better example because I was just like his age when I was hearing the Bible stories. But for you were at a place where you were like broken, had gone through all these relationships, had all this identity and all this issues, and then miraculously someone reached out to you and was praying for you.
That's true. But also I was praying and searching for God for a whole year. I was in, like you were saying, in a really bad state, and I just didn't know what to do. And I started to call out to, if there is a God, if there is one, please just show me the way. And I would pray every night, even though I didn't know how to pray. And
You're praying in Swedish.
I was praying in Swedish.
Say it in Swedish so everybody can hear. Everyone want to hear the Swedish Lord's Prayer.
Fader vår som är i himlen, helgat vare ditt namn, tillkommer ditt rike. Ske din vilja så som i himlen så och på jorden. Vårt dagliga bröd giv oss idag och förlåt oss för våra skulder, så som vi förlåta dem oss skyldiga äro. Och inled oss icke i frestelse, utan fräls oss ifrån ondo, till riket är ditt och makten och härligheten i evighet.
Amen.
So I would do that every night before I went to bed, because I, even at this point, I had a lot of experience with friends that had faith, and I was always, I was asked to sing at church or be a part of this production that was like a lot like a Christian production where I was, I was just invited and was around these, groups of people that would pray and everything. And I was like, I don't know, there's something about this and I really want to know if there is a God or not. So I started to pray every night before I went to bed. And a year later, this girl reached out to me on my music Facebook page and she said, it's a long story. I can take that maybe another time, but it was quite a letter. And the first thing that she said, I can just say a little bit. She said, you don't know who I am, but I just want you to know that God has had me in heavenly prayer for you for the last year. And recently I came across this friend of mine, or I came across this guy that had come to, he had seen you at a show, and he said this girl, and my name, Jennifer Newberry at the time, was singing at this place, and she had a really beautiful voice or something like that. And this girl that reached out to me, she says, oh my gosh, that's the girl I've been praying for the last year. And so she reached out to me and told me all of this. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. Why and how did you hear my name? And she said that she had come to faith 2 years earlier and that God was teaching her how to pray for people. And I was on one of those lists. And she felt called to reach out to me at that time. And it was the perfect time because I had been praying for a whole year, and she had praying for me for a whole year. So it was a lot of things that she continued on to tell me in that interaction. But I mean, here I am now, full on believing in Yahweh or in God and His Son. And I mean, I will never steer away from this walk because of that experience.
10 years ago now.
Yes.
So I brought that story. It's a beautiful story, and we should you should maybe tell that story in detail next week or something like that. But
yeah.
I brought that story up to say she was not on her way to murder anyone, right? And it was not an apparition that reached out to you on Facebook. It was a real person, right?
Yeah.
So it was an experience that she was met with where she was. I grew up in church, so it's a bit different for me, but
I was seeking. That's the thing.
Correct, but she was seeking. Exactly. Mm-hmm. She was not in this like, F God, I don't need God, middle finger, read between the lines, not doing a lot of Buddhist shit, all this. None of that. It was a contrite heart, a desire to learn about the Lord, and then she gets met. But here we're told that the one time Jesus blinds somebody, it's in the middle of where he's totally not contrite. And, he's like, it never hit me that it's like, okay, so let me get this straight. Most of the Jews in Judea rejected Jesus at the time. So the tiny handful of ones that did follow Yeshua was already a part of this Nazarene sect that they called the Way. And they were already to the point of where they kind of had to hide out in Damascus because the block was hot in Judea and Samaria and Galilee. And these are the people Paul is going to murder. But then at this one critical juncture in time, God decides to blind him and show up to him and his friends, or maybe not.
And before that, was James murdered before that?
Well, probably? No. Well, no. But that's a whole remix. We'll get to that in a second. But it's one of those things that's like, okay, something's not adding up about this conversion story. Plus, in case you're wondering, we're never told. And Paul apologized and repented and just decided he didn't want to do it. It's just, I believe because God blinded me, and then I disappeared for 14 years.
He got a download of Yahweh's or God's instructions, and now he's supposed to teach what he had downloaded. He
downloaded. He went to Arabia.
We all have to learn. We all have to learn the word. We all have to have this time of learning. But he just, in his state, got this all like in his mind, and now he can teach people.
But I mean, and put it like this.
No.
According to the Acts 26 reference, what does it say? We say that because there's this awesome researcher whose work I will share with you someday. But he has this thing where anytime he meets something that we're supposed to believe that because we're told it, but it's so incredulous, he'll say, so this is what you're supposed to believe? All right, fine. Like, and it cracks me up because I'm sitting there like, it's hilarious. Anyway, if we go back to Acts 26 very so briefly, he's literally told, delivering you from the people and from the Gentiles to whom I send you, that you might open their eyes. But this is like 18 seconds after he's on his way to murder the Christians. He's told by God that he's going to go to the Gentiles to open their eyes.
And they probably knew that he was someone to be afraid of.
Of course.
Like, stay out of the way.
We'll get into why, but this dude was Herod's uncle. Hello. Like when in Romans, when he's greetings, Herodian, my kinsman, and Agrippa, he's in the family tree of Edom.
Agrippa, I think, was his actual cousin and stepbrother.
Yeah. And in fact, I just found the video last night because I was going through my notes. His grandfather and his grandfather, he's the product of incest. That's the long story short.
And Edomaean, how do you say?
Edomite, yes, of course. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So, Paul's Jesus, okay, so he's the only person Jesus ever blinded or chose while they're on the way. That's a Paulnomaly. That's pretty anomalous, right? Then, separately, Paul's Jesus blinds other people too. If we look at Acts 13, chapters 9 through 11, I'm just going to read those few verses, but in the bigger chapter, Paul is in this preaching ministry. Remember how I said the book of Acts is like after the first 5 chapters is mostly the Paul saga? Yeah, well, here we are, smack dab in the middle of that. But Saul, who is also called Paul, and this is, again, a misnomer. Well, Paul had a conversion. He was struck by God, and he changed his name from Saul to Paul. Not true. Doesn't say that. And Paul was just his Latin name. His Hebrew name was Shaul. His Latin name was Paulus, or Paulus, which is the longer form of Paulus.
Let's not get into what the names mean.
Well, we're going to get into them yet. We're going to get into it, but just not yet. But Saul, who is also called Paul, filled with the Holy Spirit, looking intently at him and said, "You son of the devil, you enemy of all righteousness, full of all deceit and villainy, will you stop making crooked the straight paths of the Lord? And now, behold, the hand of the Lord is upon you, and you shall be blind and unable to see the sun for a time." Immediately, mist and darkness fell upon him, and he went about seeking people to lead him by the hand. So again, this is the only other instance we're given of Jesus blinding someone, where the Jesus or the spirit that Paul invokes blinds someone. The Mashiach that I've read about does the opposite of that. But here we go. He's blinding someone.
Can I just insert something here?
Can you?
Please.
Is it a question of ability or will?
It's just a short little I guess scripture that is this book of Sirach that's actually still in the Catholic Bible, but it was taken out of the Bible that we have. And I think this is a really great book. But in chapter 1, verse 22, it says, "A wrathful man cannot be declared right, for the sway of his wrath shall be his destruction."
Right? That's like pre-Paul by centuries, right? A wrathful man cannot be declared right, but this wrathful man was just immediately declared right, just this one time. 3 different conversion stories, quoting Dionysus, Jesus blinding people, but this is just the one time.
But then to say like that the Holy Spirit can enter him when he was in such a state,
right? It's not adding up when people think. This is why I'm imploring y'all. This is what we did. We audited our faith. A good audit, like an inventory audit, is important. If I go, oh yeah, we got like 100 boxes of cereal and 20 rolls of toilet paper and 20 rolls of paper towels in the garage.
In 2020, you know?
In 2020, right? And then we go and we're in our garage and we're actually checking and we're saying, holy smokes, I thought I had 20 rolls of paper towels and I only have 11. Or I thought I had 20 rolls of toilet paper and I only have 5. That's a good thing. What we're trying to do is audit our faith, to audit what we've been told so that we make sure we know what we believe. And part of the process of doing that is taking these writers at their word. This is another thing. I'm going to interject this here before I continue. Paul kind of tells, when I say the truth, I mean like Paul says what he means. He does not really mince words at all. We've just been given a reframing of the context of first century Judea, who the Pharisees and Sadducees were as it relates to the Nazarenes, how the canon was put together. All of these things are stuff that people in 2023 have been given as a kind of like shorthand to really piece together what we're saying. But when Paul talks about, these so-called pillars, of them I didn't learn anything. Everything I got was from the Most High or from the Lord. He does mean that. It's just the fact that we're not told that those so-called pillars are Jesus' brother, his favorite apostle, and his first ever chosen apostle. We're just thought that it's just random people in Judea who are hating on Paul. But it wasn't. And so until you go back and you're like, well, hold on now, the pillar, that's Jesus' brother. Like, what? And then you find all these writers that are like, yeah, no, they hated Paul. They never got along, in fact. And you can kind of even see that quite evident in the scriptures. It's not even not in the Bible. It's very clear in the Bible when you go back and you read it with this understanding in a bigger context of who the Idumeans were, what Paul was saying, what the people around Paul was saying. You scrutinize, okay, well, he says he's an apostle to the Gentiles, but every single place he goes, he only talks to Jews. Okay, got it. So like you encroaching on Peter's territory, or was Peter actually said to be the apostle of the Gentiles? And what's this difference in you to the circumcision and me to the uncircumcision, when according to Jesus, it was like one gospel, one message for one people, even all the way back to the beginning of Torah. It was not like a Torah for the Gentiles and a Torah for the Jews. It was just the instructions of God.
And who was the lost sheep then?
Right. Too tangential, but yes, you're right.
If we're talking about who the Gentiles were, what is then the lost sheep? Are they called Gentiles, or are they?
Right.
can get
mean,
into
that's
that
true.
later.
Yeah, we will. But I want to get through these Paulnomalies so that we can get into the next section is Jesus' doctrine versus Paul. And I'm going to set it up quite clear so you see the doctrinal differences. And then we're going to go into some like quotes that completely disagree. And then we're going to go into the disagreements between Paul and the apostles. And then we're going to explain how Christianity is literally Paulianity. It's replete with Paul's themes. In fact, everything Jesus had to say about salvation is nowhere to be found in Christianity today. It's entirely a religion based on Paul. And I was not aware of this. It took someone more mature and more studied in this to point this out for me. And then with 8 years of looking into it carefully, frustrated, crying, saying, screw it, I don't care. I'm just walking away from it for a whole year, coming back to it. Here we are. Okay. So aside from Paul's Jesus in the Damascus experience, blinding people, whereas the real Jesus never did that, or quoting lines from a pagan demigod, whereas the real Jesus only ever quoted from the Torah or from the Most High's Holy Spirit, he's the only significant character in the Bible we're introduced to while he's steeped in sin. And this passage she just read from Sirach should illustrate to you why that's a bit sus if we're told that this God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. People should be very acutely aware that Paul never actually met the real Jesus. Paul never actually met Jesus. Paul never actually met Jesus. And we'll talk about it later. Paul never really quotes Jesus. You got all the books in the whole entire Bible, all the most words. And you can find a single time to actually quote Jesus once, or maybe once. But really, are we really talking about a couple lines from the Lord's Prayer that has nothing to do with the salvation model? Or are we talking about the one time in 1 Corinthians, he quotes what he calls Jesus, who wouldn't deliver him from a demon, whereas the Jesus that I read about elsewhere was constantly delivering people from demons, especially his chosen apostles like Peter, and employing and empowering Peter to go deliver demons from others. This time Paul quotes Jesus, the one time he does, it's really to be like, yeah, well, he said, no, I'm not going to deliver this thorn in the flesh, this angel of Satan I gave you, so you don't boast. And then he spends another 12 books boasting. So Paul never actually met Jesus. Y'all really have to keep that in mind. As far as chronology goes, Paul's books and Paul's experience in his conversion story starts roughly 3 to 5 years after Jesus' time in his ministry. Then the Nazarene movement starts to get pretty big. So big that the high priest had a problem with it, to the point where they would be willing to sanction this dude who some scholars say was trying to holler at the high priest's daughter. And it was like, what do you need? What do you mean? Kill the Christians? Well, you gonna get me in your good grace? I can holler at Susie over there. Okay, cool. What do you? I'm your dude. I'll get it done. This is how we meet this dude, right?
And wasn't he like really related to that priest's daughter too? Also, when you look in the
plot twist, yes, but that's true. Yes, she's right, but. The sus conversion, the Simpsons. I got the sus conversion story only has him hearing this alleged Jesus with mixed stories. Peter says, how can an apparition save you? We walk with the master for 3 years. This is Peter's writing in this book, the Nazarene Acts, the entire book where it's not talking about Paul at all, except for to talk about the man who is my enemy. All Peter can seem to do is quote Jesus the whole time. For I do not want my words to get in the way of the master's words. All I do is repeat the master so that my worth is diminished, so that the master shines. That's Peter. That's Peter saying that, right? But Paul never quotes him once. Everything is my gospel, my this. And
it wasn't taught by them either.
When they butted heads and they butt heads in Galatians, right? So again, you read Paul's side of the story where they didn't get along. The table fellowship, when the men come from James and Peter breaks table fellowship with the Gentile, and Paul's like, why do you do this? Why do you put people in da? Read the end of that story. Barnabas disagrees. John Mark disagrees. Everybody leaves and goes to sides with Peter. But then when you read it from Peter's side of the story, same exact experience, you're like, oh, got it. Like, that actually does make sense. And according to Peter, that is what Jesus would have asked him to do. So I guess Paul was in the wrong. Turns out everybody else in the room agrees. So when you read Peter says, how is it that we journey with the master? I'm paraphrasing here, but how is it that we journey with the master for 3 years and you don't come and sit and learn from us? Oh, of those pillars, all of them, I learned nothing. Oh, I didn't learn from them. Really though, bro? Like, you are out here trying to murder us, and now we sitting here giving you half a minute to hear you out, and you sitting there like, oh, you don't want to hear it, la, la, la. You don't need to hear from us. We journey with the master. And then he goes, and even if the master would have told you, why would he come to you as an apparition? And he literally says as an apparition. He says, apparitions do not give you the authority to preach. And even if an apparition did give you the authority to preach, why do you preach opposite to what we're saying? Why don't you come and rock with us, learn from us, like the rest of all the disciples? They had a whole process, right? Because of people like Paul, you couldn't just be like, oh, I believe, and then start preaching.
And I just want to interject that too. If you can use that as a means of to be able to teach, then that can be misused or taken advantage of. You say, I just had an apparition, or I just had a dream.
Had a dream. I mean, that's
some of the religions that we have now has started with dreams.
Not some.
All of them. All of them, I should say. All of them.
Visions or dreams.
Yeah.
The Mormonism is the famous one, right? Joseph Smith. Even from Paul to like literally, I'm on my way to go do my thing, and then God, in the form of a light, slaps me over the head and says, don't do it, is the origin story of every major religion, just in case y'all wanted to compare. So,
but then, Peter, just to note a little bit there, when it comes to apparitions, and he mentions that when a angel appears to you, they will always appear as a man.
As a man.
Always. It will never be a ghost-like vision. Ever. It's one thing to, like, if you are dreaming.
It's one thing if you're
a message comes to you.
Sure. Or you're in a trance, you get taken up in an out-of-body experience. It's a separate thing. But as far as I'm a human on earth on my horse and I get knocked off and I'm not in the middle of a dream, that doesn't happen unless an angel in the form of a man pushes you off the horse. Not because this light that was brighter than the sun just showed up while you're on your way to go murder the 12 or 15 people that recognize Jesus as Messiah. It just is kind of like I know if I was God, I would not be choosing the guy to be my loudest mouthpiece above my own son's words in the form of the guy who's going to murder the tiny subset of people who recognize my son as Messiah when he came. You see what I mean?
And I think, as people, we know that it's hard to break away from old habits, too. If there are things that you don't like about yourself that you want to change, how you approach people, or just to be a kind of person. It might take a while to break away from those ways.
Right.
So the fact that he was on his way to murder the people that were following Jesus, Yeshua, and then completely just, now I am like completely cut off from all those ways, and he was actually a murderer at that time. That is a pretty far-fetched thing to me.
It's a stretch. It's a little bit of a stretch. If Peter can be like, we journeyed with the master, we ate with him, we sat with him, we learned from him for 3 years. But you can't sit there for like 5 minutes and come, okay, I'm fine. All right, I went away for 14 years and now I'm back. I mean, Jesus blinded me, and it was the best and most transformative experience of my life. And instead of preaching right away, I disappeared into Arabia for 14 years. Where's Arabia? The Edomite stronghold, the headquarters of where the Ebionites family was all from. Got it. So you go away to Arabia for 14 years, and then when you come back to Jerusalem, you spend like a week and a half with Peter. And I'm sure Peter was just kind of like, well, what is it you want to know? I'm Paul. I'm going to stop putting words in his mouth. We're going to keep moving. Jesus never blinded anybody. Jesus never spoke to anyone as an apparition. There is no second witness to Saul's conversion or his apostleship. Please get that real clear. Everybody has a second witness to everything. That's why some of the prophecies that we today can still see that are very true about Messiah, about the restoration of Israel, about, the return to a pure tongue or pure lip. from Enoch's time, from Moses, like from way at the beginning, these things are things that hold up because they'd have multiple witnesses, more than one person in more than one era that says that the Most High indicates this is so. Paul has 0 witnesses to his conversion because they were either blinded, they didn't see the light, they heard it, but they didn't hear it, or whoever those men were, nobody knows. Nor to his apostleship. You will never see a single other apostle calling him apostle. You will never see anybody calling him apostle except for the one guy he trained and himself. Okay?
And so that means also anybody that's calling themselves an apostle right now could never be an apostle because they weren't there.
They weren't there.
So
now, yes.
Just letting you know.
Just so you're clear. So, an apostle, and I'm glad you mentioned that because that takes me to my next point. An apostle is not some willy-nilly title in Greek. It's not just like, the disciple, apostle, disciple. No, these words mean things, okay? Let's get some terms defined. A disciple is a talmudim, a taught one, somebody who is a student of something. If I sign up for Theology 101, I am a disciple. I am a talmudim. I am a student of this school. An apostle is the equivalent in English of what we would call an emissary. An emissary or an ambassador. So nobody's an emissary of Frito-Lay's potato chips. Nobody's an emissary of gray sweaters. You're an emissary of a king or a nation. Okay? So if you live, especially because I'm married to a Swede, she's dual citizen, so we don't have to deal with consulates or embassies. But if we did, we would be dealing with ambassadors and emissaries of foreign nations living in other nations, speaking on behalf of the king, prime minister, or president of that foreign nation that they're representing. Okay, so an emissary is someone, like if I'm an ambassador, let's just say I'm in the Swedish consulate. I'm in the American consulate in Sweden, in Stockholm, most likely. I don't know if it's elsewhere, but in Stockholm, Sweden, the biggest city in Sweden, I work as an ambassador or an emissary for the American government or for the American State Department. That means I will be talking to the Wicked Witch of the West, Victoria Nuland. I mean, the American State Department leader, and most likely would have had meetings with the actual president of the United States to get my briefings on how I can speak on the behalf of the president in the consulate in Sweden. So I get my marching orders. I get this is what we're for. This is what we won't do. This is why we answer these questions. I'll defer to so and so and so. If I do or don't.
All the ins and outs, basically.
I hop on my little SAS flight, my Scandinavian Air or my Norwegian Air if they actually still flew. Oh, hashtag that was a cheap airline. They stopped flying. Oh, man. Anyway, I hop on my flight and I'm now in my flat somewhere with my Swedish crown paycheck in Sweden, working as an ambassador, and I go before any representative of the Swedish parliament or government or King Gustav himself, and I go, I'm speaking on behalf of the American government. Sorry, you can't talk to Biden or Trump or Obama or whoever at the time. You got to talk to me. I'll relay the message to homegirl at the State Department, and if it needs to get run up the chain to the president, we will. But I actually answer and field those questions. So I represent the king. If the king says this is our stance on foreign policy, this is our stance on foreign policy. As an ambassador, I don't get to just say, well, this is my stance on foreign policy. I'm an ambassador of America, but you know what I think? I say F it. I say yeehaw. I say Yosemite Sam, let's go. Right? I don't get to do that if I'm the actual ambassador, because some military agent would just fly a drone outside of the consulate window, and those skinny windows they have in them government buildings. I'd be like this the second I want to start talking about my own good news about the American, the way.
Just to put it, Yeshua was an emissary of the Father in heaven.
Of course, Yeshua was a king.
And his apostles, his disciples, were supposed to be the replication of who he was.
Exactly. His disciples were learning from who he was. His apostles, they can spread the word. Correct. His apostles were hand selected to specifically do everything that Peter kept doing in this book, saying, I only say what the master told me to say. I'm only repeating the words of Jesus. If this book had letters in red, it would be basically a red book with some black letters. I'm being a bit campy, but it's tons of Peter giving us Jesus's perspective on a matter. Ask me how many times Paul quotes Jesus. You see what I'm saying? Okay. So I'm zeroing in on this because unless you want to talk about, I said 1 Corinthians earlier, 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 9. Unless you want to go to 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 9. We're just going to look at that right quick. Which one did I skip? Oh, yeah, I talked about that. 2 Corinthians. And to keep me from being too elated by the abundance of revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan. Some translations will say an angel of Satan. So we're talking not a demon. He wasn't demon possessed. He was walked into by what people today would call a walk-in.
A higher rank.
A much higher rank than a demon. Okay. I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger, an angel of Satan to harass me, to keep me from being too elated. Now, this is God's chosen apostle, right? He met God on the road to Damascus, right? After God blinded him. Anomaly number 1. Then God gives him a demon just to keep him in check. Okay. That's what he says. A messenger of Satan to harass me from being too elated. 3 times I besought the Lord about this, that it should leave me. God, please take this angel of Satan away from me. Please, please, I ask you 3 times. Please, God, please. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. I will all the more gladly boast of my weakness, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. So Jesus spent his whole entire life delivering people from demons. But in this instance, the only time we have a quote, literal quotation marks around anything that a Jesus character was supposed to say in the words of Paul, is Jesus saying, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And he does not remove the demon or the angel of Satan from the thorn in the side of Paul. All right, cool. So going on to the next part. Right now, what I'm trying, this next section is going to be foundational for anybody who's kept up with me this far. And again, stick with me. Just hear me out. I've given y'all literally a handful of the chips of a puzzle piece in a 10,000 piece puzzle that I would have to carry like this, all the pieces in to sit it in and get it all in, just to get all the pieces in. I've given you just a handful of these chips, and we're going to go through a handful more. Okay. So right now this section I'm calling Jesus's doctrine versus Paul's doctrine. So what I want y'all to do is here.
A notepad.
Well, you can do that if you want to draw a line right down the middle and be like, Jesus says these types of things, Paul says these types of things. And I was going to wait to the end to say this, but I'm going to say this throughout, and I'll say it again at the end in case people don't make it all the way to the end for one reason or another. Next time you in church, next time you listen to a sermon from a pastor you really think is talking about what Jesus was talking about, I want you to mark down how many times this pastor or this speaker references Paul versus how many times they reference Jesus. And in some cases, you can just lump David and Moses and everybody else in with that. But let's just simplify. Paul and Jesus. Any verse that comes from Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, Titus, or Philemon, write it down. Mark it on this side of the paper. Anything that comes from Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, or you could even say James, Jesus' brother, Jude, Jesus' brother, or we'll even say John in Revelation. Or we'll even toss it in the epistles, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. Write it on this page, but particularly the letters in red. And I guarantee you will find 10-1 Paul to Jesus, maybe 13-1. When I first heard this, I was like, really? Nah. And I did it, and every single time, 10-1 at least. They will always say, well, the Bible says, scriptures say, the apostle says. It's Paul. Christianity is a religion of Paul, with Jesus as the mascot. I'm hoping I can make that clear for you tonight.